I am super excited because we are now on Global Divestment Day. Well, it's obviously 2 days, today and tomorrow, and we're having our action in Lund tomorrow, so I'm really excited.
Okay. Well, first of all, thanks a lot for giving your time. I'm going to ask some questions which are in blocks about 350 and then about 350 and your group, and breaks down more and more. And I hope we're going to be done in 15 minutes.
Sure.
Okay. So, what do you think is 350.org's objective?
It is to engage people at a local level around the world, around climate, basically. It takes a bit of different approach depending on the local context, basically. But obviously it's about gathering people around this sort of political message of a 350, which is the 350 parts per million carbon dioxide that we can, safely have in the atmosphere without escalating climate change to irreversible consequences. So, yeah, raising political awareness by engaging people around that.
Okay. And what do you think what's their strategy to achieve that goal?
I think it's to basically gather people around issues that matter to them. So I get the feeling that 350 is thinking out, or sort of, working around topics that really relate to people. So, for example, about connecting the dots about local impacts of the global problem of climate change. So, basically, wherever you are in the world, you feel that you are sort of struck by climate change, for example, in your local context, you can attach to it, and they form their campaigns, I think, very successfully around topics and that people can really relate to. And I think that is, at least that what was got myself sort of hooked on their campaigning strategy and the organization as such from the beginning. That I felt really strongly towards how they were communicating climate change in a new way that hadn't been communicated before.
How do they communicate it? How do they frame it?
Well, I mean, when I first got in contact with them was in 2009, I think, or 2010, I can't even remember. And it was this thing about getting people locally to gather around how climate was impacting them, but sort of scaling it up to the global community and really sort of communicating this, that we're in this together kind of thing. I mean, without dropping names of other organizations, but the way I had been working with climate and environment before was that you either look at the global or at the local. You work in your local context, or you sort of try to communicate the global separately. And I think what really sort of hooked me up was this idea of global actioning, but at the local level. And yeah.
Okay, what would you say how they present their message in terms of, is it do we have to save the climate for economic reasons? Do we have to save it, for what reason do we have to engage in climate action?
I think it's very holistic. It's really, their communication is really about sort of bringing in the systems perspective. Climate change affects everything, basically. So it's not about treating climate as something isolated or hooking it up to, loss of biodiversity in particular, or poverty in particular, but it's really, a systems thinking about that wrecking the climate will affect everything. And that is something that really gets communicated by this idea of grassroots movements, because obviously people who live in different parts of the world are affected differently, and so different stories will be communicated automatically, basically.
Okay. And how do you communicate with 350.org?
Myself personally,
Mhm.
or so I have been working quite closely with the team in Europe that works on the fossil-free campaign for about a year now, as a trainee, you can say. So I communicate a lot with 350 staff members in Europe, mostly via Skype, but also we have been meeting a few times in Europe, campaigners and staff members,
Mhm.
but then also a lot of emailing.
Okay.
Yeah.
And where do you get your information from? Like the information about what you think about 350.org?
For me, it's mostly now through personal contact then, via staff members and other campaigners, but also a lot through their media, no, sorry, not me, but email sort of blasts or whatever. They send out emails to everyone who has signed onto their webpage, I guess. So that's quite frequently to get updates from there.
Mhm. How is leadership organized in 350.org?
It's so they have regional coordinators in all sort of on all continents, I think. I'm not sure. And then there are staff members. I don't know how many staff members exactly there are, maybe 60 or so around the world, who basically coordinate campaigners and grassroots groups in different geographical locations around the world. And that's pretty much all I know. It's not so visual, like who is a staff member contra who is like voluntarily campaigning. For me, at least, it's whoever is active is sort of can be seen within the organization. So you wouldn't really know if they're actually 350 staff or like volunteer campaigner. But and then there's obviously the front figure, Bill McKibben, who is a lot exposed in the media and who's one of the founders of 350. Recently, also some of the other board members have stepped up and taken like quite a public role. Naomi Klein, for example, because of the release of her book, and so forth. Yeah.
Could you imagine 350 without Bill McKibben?
Sure. However, I think he definitely plays an important role. He has really been the public figure since the start, I guess. And now also with winning the Right Livelihood Award last year, has obviously sort of brought him even more into the spotlight. However, I think that the organization itself is rooted enough now to sort of move on, even if he stepped down. But I personally believe that every organization more or less needs, or it's good for an organization to have a front figure. Maybe it doesn't necessarily need it, but I definitely think it's positive in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
What about this fossil-free group? How is leadership organized here?
Do you mean locally?
Mm-hmm.
Or well, that's a good question. We're about 10-15 people who are very active here in Lund, and we are sort of self-organizing. I have the feeling that we don't really have any assigned roles, but we more or less different people take on different responsibilities depending on our activities, really. So it is sort of a bit floating. We have had me, for example, have sort of been the media contact for the only reason that I was one of the few people starting the campaign in the first place. So it was just natural that I had that role. And we have one person who has more or less been in contact with the university. So we have like shared responsibilities, but for like different areas. And yeah.
Mm-hmm. In what way do you feel involved in the overall 350 strategy?
On a personal level, I feel very involved. I feel sort of emotionally attached, and that has sort of progressed since I first got in contact with the organization. However, I don't really feel attached in a way that, you know, I have to do certain things or behave in a certain way just because I do things sort of in 350's name via fossil free, which is that's a good thing, I think. So yeah, it's.
Which meaning does the organization have for your local group? Is it kind of facilitating or showing the direction, or?
I think it's more supporting. I feel like the group knows that we can get support from 350, mainly 350 Europe then, because it's really, so in that way it's really split up. Like we barely have any contact with 350 International, but it's the regional group in Europe. And they have, for example, a social media organizer and a media responsible person. And they are very supportive in our work. So, you know, whenever we have an activity, they always reach out and say, hey guys, remember that you can contact us. So I think in that way, we feel that we can get support basically. And obviously also we have a 350 staff member in Sweden, Olivia, coordinating the fossil free campaign. And she's always very supportive. Also, both making sure that, you know, if we need any financial assistance or so for actions, it will be there. So, yeah.
And how does the movement influence the forming of identity of your local group?
Good question. I mean, first of all, I guess this whole feeling of being part of something bigger, I think is very important. I can obviously only speak for myself, but that's also the feeling I get from, I have been involved in different groups also before here in Lund, and that is really one of the things I think that sort of shapes the local group, that we feel that we're part of this bigger movement. And I think also for the fossil free campaign, to have this sort of common enemy in the fossil fuel industry is really important, because before, climate campaigning was, at least for me, you know, you were fighting for something better or you were fighting against something bad, but you didn't really have a clear direction. And I think that's what distinguishes the fossil free campaign a lot from previous climate campaigning that I've done, at least, that we really have a clear goal, and it's like really clearly communicated from 350's side and sort of from the initiators of the campaign of, you know, where we're going and why, and that really creates a sense of urgency, but also it's really empowering, I think.
To which extent is your local group self-organized or dependent on the movement?
So it's self-organized in the way that we have totally adapted it to the local context here in Lund. So, I mean, we have researched the situation we have here, and we have developed a strategy that suits Lund University here, which is very different from other local strategies that have been and are undertaken in other local places. However, of course, we are attached to the bigger movement with, you know, the way we communicate, sort of the whole concept of the carbon bubble and these numbers that we talk about, the 2-degree target and the 565 gigatons that we can burn, which is only, you know, we have to keep 4/5 of the fossil fuels in the ground. So that sort of bottom line communication is very, I mean, I at least feel that, you know, that's something I have to do. If I'm campaigning under the logo fossil free, that's the sort of communication I need to have. But then the way we do it, I think we have adapted, like, to the local context.
Okay, so would you say that how much freedom does your local group have in its decision?
We have a lot of freedom, I'd say. Absolutely. I mean, as I said, we are of course sort of obliged to communicate these numbers in a right way. Not obliged, but they're asking us to. And also to, of course, communicate also the actual ask of divesting, which is like freeze any new investments in the fossil fuel industry now and divest fully within 5 years. But otherwise, and of course, like use the logo and those kind of things, which is something I haven't done really before. But I mean, within that, I would say that we're free to do what we want.
And to which extent do you use that freedom? I mean, if you say there's some guidelines that you have to stick to, you could stick to them a lot, or you could also do like a lot of creative things. So how much freedom do you really use?
I think we could obviously do even more with sort of what we have, but I don't think that has anything to do with like sort of the freedom or not from how we are attached to the movement. It's more about our own creativity and the way of how we see our own campaigning. I mean, obviously we are sort of pushing the borders every semester, I think, and like sort of trying out new things, and we have sort of tried to make our way through a bit. Like we have tried a bit of lobbying with the university, and then we have tried a bit to be more public, and then we have tried to lobby the media. So we're just, I think, trying out strategies to see what works. And it's also really dependent on who's in the group. So I have now been active for 1, 2, 3, 4. This is my 4th semester. And yeah, I can really say that depending on who's in the group, who's campaigning, the campaign will take different terms. So we will do either more sort of in the back lobbying, like writing to the university board or whatever, or we'll do more public activities. So yeah.
Okay. Do you have any improvements in mind you would wish for in the cooperation between your local group and 350?
I don't know. I mean, I think from both sides we are already doing a lot to communicate what's going on. Like we are reaching out with what we're doing, and 350 is doing a great job in communicating what's happening around the world, which brings this whole thing of, you know, being part of the global movement, brings that up. I guess maybe what could be improved is the sort of connection between the fossil-free campaign and the wider 350 movement. Because as of now, obviously the fossil-free campaign is the campaign that 350 is pushing for, and like the fastest growing and so forth, but there are still a lot of other things happening. And I think, at least for me personally, it has been, I have left the other sort of climate campaigning and the other stuff that 350 are doing, that's a bit in the periphery right now, and it's only focused on fossil-free. So I guess that's one thing to you know, keep connecting what we're doing here locally to that wider climate campaigning, not just the fossil-free movement. But yeah.
Okay. Whom do you address, like now in your local group? From like whom do you address to become active members? So which circle of people is your target group you would address if you wanted to enlarge the active members?
Oh, if we would want to get more members. Yeah. I mean, so far we have mainly been out on public events at the university, so like the welcoming fair, and obviously then students from wherever pass by and approach us. We haven't so far really made any sort of attempts to go and recruit people. It has more been like we have done public activities, and then people have approached us and say, hey, that sounds fun. I want to become a member. Or you don't really become a member because it's not an organization, but become active. So I wouldn't say that we turn sort of our heads to any certain groups, but then, of course, if you look around in the active group, people do come from sort of specific backgrounds, like students already studying environment or social issues to some extent. So that's for sure.
I do have a picture here, which is like, it's called the Six Americas, and like it's like segregated in different groups. So what would you say where you find, or where most people come from in your local group? So here is like the end of the scale, like people who are not interested or don't believe in global warming or are not aware of it, and here is the opposite.
I would definitely say in this end, for sure. However, what I find really interesting with this campaign, and maybe not only here in Lund, or specifically here in Lund, but more in general, is that compared to other climate campaign groups, we are actually also addressing people and like managing to attract people more on this end. And I think that has to do with the financial arguments that are also in the campaign, which is something like a new dimension brought into the climate campaigning. Because if you only campaign on climate issues from like a sort of ecological or whatever point of view, you do not reach out to those people. But since the fossil-free campaign has this financial dimension as well, which is, you know, leave the fossil fuels in the ground for not losing this money, it also at least attracts the attention of people sort of more in the middle of the scale and even towards the right end, I'd say.
How do you communicate with potential members?
We mostly communicate the fact that, like simple communication, the fact that Lund University is investing in fossil fuels, sort of behind the bottom line of if it's wrong to wreck the climate, it's also wrong to profit from that wreckage. So simple communication about this is the situation and this is what we're doing about it, basically. That we are students who think this is wrong. It's part of a global movement. People are campaigning about this all over the world. So it's a great thing to be a part of. And we also really try to push for this thing that it really involves us as students, because the money that the university invests should always obviously be sort of investing in the future of the students. And with investing in fossil fuels, it's obviously being invested in the complete opposite. So, yeah.
Okay. Jo, would you mind leaving that for a bit longer?
Oh, shit.
Because otherwise it will be just gone and it's going to be a bit difficult to...
Sorry.
Thank you. Okay, and how do you contact or get in touch with potential members?
As I said, we mainly do public activities. So visit the welcoming fair each semester, and we do demonstrations and manifestations out in the public. Regularly, we are out on campus collecting signatures for our petition. And when a student or whoever signs the petition, they can also like tick in if they want to have more information. And so then they end up on our email list, and we will send out an email, basically shortly explaining what we're doing. And yeah, that's how it has worked out so far. We could probably do a lot more to attract more people, but that's how we have done it.
And how do you communicate within your local group?
Mainly via Facebook. We have a Facebook group for the active members, and then if it's like a particular issue, something regarding a press invite or something, we would communicate via email around that specific issue, but it's mostly via Facebook. And then we have regular meetings. Every Tuesday we have lunch meetings. So we make sure that we meet regularly to just update each other on what's going on. And then again, if we have certain activities, we would meet more often.
Do you have any form of organizational language, like specific words you use that kind of, for example, call people change makers or changey, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Not that I can think of, really. I mean, it's obviously this terminology of divesting, the carbon bubble, the stranded assets, those terms that are the sort of the global terms used in the campaign. We use them a lot. Let me think. I guess there should be. I mean, I guess a word that we use a lot is future, because it's all, that's the whole thing we're talking about, you know, investing for a future or not. But yeah.
So do you have anything in mind that differs from like the global terminologies?
Not that I can think of.
How do you call yourself, like your group, if you talk about like telling a friend, I'm going to, no?
Yeah, Fossil Free Lund University. I would, or the Fossil Free meeting. And yeah, I guess that's.
And same for visuals. Do you have any visual signs that differ from 350.org, like apart from this kind of official?
Well, not really. I mean, we use that, and then we have the Swedish version, so just saying SE under it, that we use in Sweden. Sometimes we also write Lund under it with exclamation mark. And then we communicate the hashtag divest or hashtag divestera, which is the Swedish word. But I think that's it. Yeah.
And who decides about the design of those like posters and other means of communication?
That's being done internationally. So, I mean, that one is that's the international logo. So that was just basically given to us. Here, use this. It has been other things written for certain occasions. We had that when we have printed posters for different activities. It has been coordinated both at European and national and local level. So, for example, for this Global Divestment Day, we completely designed our own poster using that logo and also the Global Divestment Day logo. That was one created internationally for this day. But we created our own poster.
So the breakup poster was made by yourselves?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And like, did you think of any style guide, or did you just because you liked it the way you did it?
I think this particular one, we just did it the way we liked it. I mean, there are like fonts and what do you say, like types of writing. We have frames for that online in a Google Drive that we have been provided by 350 and the International Fossil Free team. So whenever we create leaflets or flyers or whatever, we try and use that font at least. So we always use the orange color and the certain type of writing that Fossil Free, that has this sort of that it looks like handwritten. So those things are pre-made. So we can like code that and use that. Yeah.
We're almost done.
Mm-hmm.
You said it before shortly, but maybe you have something to add on what it means to you to be part of an international movement with coordinated action moments.
It means a lot, absolutely, because, I mean, obviously this being engaged in the climate or with climate issues is sometimes quite depressing and burdensome, and it's a huge topic and huge issue and obviously a lot of obstacles, and it feels like a fight, really. So having this feeling of being part of something greater, I mean, for me, it's what keeps me going. If I was sort of doing it on myself, I think I would have given up a long time ago. So it's for sure, it's the sort of engine in that I personally keep going.
what does it do, like being part of this movement? What does it do to your sense of hope for the climate?
It's the same answer. I mean, if I didn't see other people around the world caring and doing so much, again, I would have given up, because there's so many obstacles and so much sort of working against us or my personal beliefs in a way, that if I didn't see that progress happening, I mean, if you just sort of look out the door, only even here in Lund, which is a great and climate friendly city and whatever, there's so many destructive activities. So if I didn't constantly sort of got that attachment to other activities, I would give up.
Okay, and apart from like the hope you have for the movement to succeed, what does it mean to you to be part of a movement for your personal attitude towards? Like, do you feel hope for the climate? Like, do you feel empowered, or?
I feel empowered to keep fighting. I am not convinced that we will win, and I am definitely not sure that we will save the climate, or we will not. I mean, it's already changing, I mean, we are in a destructive sort of, we have a destructive way of living, and for some parts of it, I totally believe it's sort of too late. I mean, it's escalating in the wrong direction, which brings me back to, you know, if I didn't see other people fighting for something better, I would just give up. Like, there's no, so I guess that is the sort of bottom line, that even if I'm not sure that we will win, this is still sort of save what's left kind of thing. And that sounds really depressing, but no, but I mean, it's also really for connecting to people in other parts of the world who are living in another reality, because obviously here in Sweden, we don't face climate change in our daily lives, but people in other parts of the world do. But they're fighting, they're not giving up. So in that sense, like, sort of being connected to that sort of inspires me even more, and that, you know, well, I have this sort of life situation, but they're fighting, so of course I should as well. So yeah.
Mm. And do you see yourself as an individual agent of change, apart from the movement, your group, and so on?
I do, actually, absolutely. I have kind of always also done my own thing on the side of it, via my studies and some work positions that I've had, and so I also do my own stuff in that sense. So yeah, I do, actually.
And also inside of 350 or the fossil campaigning, or do you kind of merge with the movement?
Within 350, I feel like I merge with the movement most of the times. But I also know from experience that individuals can really make a change, and strong individuals mean a lot, both for the local campaigns and also for the global movement. So absolutely, I mean, I feel like my actions matter, and that, you know, whatever I do it personally, and I get appreciated for that. But yeah, also definitely as just one big floating, which is great. Yeah.
Okay. Do you have anything else you want to add? Any further information you want to give me, or something that comes to your mind?
No, not really.
Okay.
Yeah.
And if you could just look straight into the camera and present yourself, like your name, what you're studying. Maybe that's it.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Caroline Westblom, and I am studying environmental management and policy here at Lund University, my last semester.
All right.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm sorry that it took around at least